or not?
Which yesterday? I'm sorry, I don't know. What
so not yesterday. Last one you did on
YouTube.
No,
did it work? It worked fine. It's I still don't know exactly how to. Still some bugs, but it did actually work. The first time I tried to go live, and part of what he's referencing is the first attempt that I made to go live was a complete abject failure because I don't know what I'm doing. And but I'm looking now, and we are live on the interwebs, and I'm going to put the link in the chat. So if anybody wants to share that, they can. But hello, YouTube, and welcome to the fourth or fifth audio opinion show. And this is the part of the story where I play that they can. But hello, YouTube. And,
yeah, well,
welcome to
that's like just your opinion, man.
The audio opinion show. And so there you go. We are here. It is the audio opinion show where we all gather together and all have opinions about things. Thank you, Dave, for the voiceover for the video. You're a brilliant dude. So the first thing out of the box we're going to do is close Safari so I don't have to listen to us. Second thing we're going to do is just a quick round robin of who we are. So we've got Pete. He's mostly a sound reinforcement guy, but is now doing a lot more online stuff because we all are. Bill Mills, my old friend who's a sound reinforcement guy, owns a sound reinforcement company, does a lot of install stuff. Tucker, who does a whole lot of different kinds of production stuff, started as an audio guy. Andy is also a sound reinforcement and programmer guy. Dave is just kind of a loser, but we like him anyway, sound reinforcement guy. Ike is sound reinforcement and RF coordinator guy, and Baiju is an audio video integration, everything that we have to do to make things happen so that people can talk to each other kind of person. And so welcome to all of them. Welcome to folks that are just kind of lurking. So then the first thing out of the box is we have to do our poll. And of course, the most important poll of the day is, what is the best movie of all time? There is only one proper answer. There is only one correct answer. Everyone knows what the correct answer is if they've been on here before. This is also my way to find out who is contrarian and is just going to vote against me just because they can. I actually think that one of the things I'm going to do is like actually have like 5 or 6 machines so that I can just vote 14 times for what I want. Then I get what I want. All right, we'll end it there. And yes, we did get that correct. The answer is The Princess Bride. Sorry, it's just the only correct answer. That's just the way it is. So thanks for those who got that right. Looking at my topics things, what was it we were talking about when we were chatting before we started that was sort of a good launching? Oh, it was headphone impedance and whether it matters. I like that as a topic. So I'm going to put off the poll for a second, and we're going to talk a little bit about that only because Pete brought it up. And so then I'm going to make Pete give me his opinion on headphone impedance and does it matter to the way it sounds or not?
Go me.
Go you.
Go me.
And I'm sorry, the one thing I didn't do in the intros for you guys that I should have done is, and especially for those of you who don't know, feel free to interrupt, talk over each other. This isn't a fancy forum, just jump in, say what you want, leave your mics open. I don't care.
That's your opinion, man.
Dogs and cats lying together, mass hysteria. I don't care. So it's all good. All right, Pete, what about headphones?
Well, this started because I was inquiring about Andrew's headphones that he's wearing on his head. And I know that they're the AKGs and know that the original run of those were high impedance, and some headphone amplifiers used to not be able to power them loudly enough in live applications, like in the early 90s, let's say.
In the olden days.
So, and then I went through a headphone extravaganza, order one of everything on B&H and return them all except for one or two, type of thing.
Right.
Did that a few years ago. And I don't know that there is a correct answer other than that. What's the device driving it? And
Well, I mean,
know,
I'm interrupting you because I don't actually know. Like,
yeah.
I just did a like 2 or 3 YouTube videos on like impedance, and I still don't fully understand impedance, and I don't fully understand how all the things. So like, I mean, other than I understand that depending on what they're made of, it changes, but like
It's matching though. I mean, it's like if you turn up your amplifier louder,
Yeah.
perhaps it sounds better. So you can now run your amplifier at a hotter level. And
See,
maybe
so that's the thing. Like when we were doing the microphone check with Tucker earlier, the levels have to be within like at least a dB in order to really understand the difference in quality. And so with headphones, it's quite hard when, if you have a headphone that's 600 ohms and one that's 250 ohms and one that's 32 ohms, and you're using your iPhone or your computer to listen to them all, you can't accurately match all those to really hear the difference. I mean, I would say that maybe with the modern headphone amps that we have today, that a lower impedance allows for potentially more accurate reproduction, but I'm sure that there's ways to contest that. They're
Well,
easier
it
to
depends
blow
on
up.
its drive capability and also the voltage. The voltage rails, can it actually drive a 600 ohm headphone? And if it's super low impedance, we know that some amplifiers just don't work well at very low impedance. So I think it all depends, like everything else. I was thinking though, when you're talking about headphones, I just wondered whether you'd seen the Dave Rat headphone shootout and his take on how to do a sound check with just headphones, which I found kind of interesting. Did you agree with his assessment of the various headphones that he checked out? If anybody watched that,
Was that the one from like a few years ago where he had the
all
Denons and the these and the those and
I assume so. I don't even know
Yeah.
what ones he ended up with. Probably Sennheisers or something, but he was saying, oh, they need to sound exactly the same as it does when you take them off, sort of thing. And I get that.
yeah.
I see. I mean, I get what he's saying. I just don't know that
I mean, actually, that
yeah.
video spurred me to do the headphone search deeper because I mean, we all have 7506s in our kits, right? But they're not
I'm
close
not a
to
fan.
anything that's
Not a fan of those.
nice listening, right? And one thing
quick show of hands, who uses 7506s on a regular basis?
I did before mine got blown up by a shorted headphone amp.
wow.
They're just the devil I know. I know that they're extremely not flat, but they're the devil I know. I mean, for me, headphone. Part of the reason why I picked this topic is I have no valid opinion on this because I just don't care. For me, headphones are, oh, it's there. Like that's the like all I use headphones for. Oh, it's there. Oh, I need to make sure it's clean. Jack the headphone amp all the way up and it's not buzzing. Okay. Like I'm not using them for frequency.
listening.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, I don't know any
They're
live
not
guys
critical
that are
listening tools.
doing their EQing on headphones. I think all of us recognize that like what it sounds like up there and in context is way more important.
Yeah.
And so,
Right.
is there ground loop? Like, am I down a leg? What's going on?
Of course. And which headphones did you decide were the best, Pete? Or did you decide on a set?
For me, after I listened to them all, I settled on a biodynamic, those 770 Pro. The lower, there's 2 impedance ones. The low, I think 80 ohm, for the purposes of using my devices.
Have those been around for a while, Pete? I feel like
they're the white foamy, the white kind of.
Yeah.
You
I
see
feel
them
like
in studios. You see them.
I feel like that was actually when I was doing more studio stuff and was actually tracking myself and tracking vocals and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They were so much. 7506s are so bright.
Yeah, the problem with the biodynamics is I've blown up 2 of them, whereas 7506s have limiter, like current.
Everything from Bayer is blow upable, especially those M88s.
Yeah, and that's what's nice about those 600 ohm AKGs is. Some like the Ramza 840 or some of those older consoles, you could have that headphone amp jacked and have the kick drum cued the entire concert, and those headphones still work the next day.
Yeah,
Well,
which I
in
think
the
is
old
probably
days-
a big part of. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
just stepped all over you, Ike. But I think that's the biggest reason why I use 7506s, because they just, now Bill has probably managed to kill a couple, because I've seen at least 4 dozen of them over the years in his shop. But that might have been more from attrition and getting stepped on, and less from like getting blown up.
And not being able to find replacement earphones for them, and that black little stickies that end up all over the side of your
Right.
result.
Right.
So,
Rittenhouse, I don't know if you actually have weighed in on this incredibly important headphone thing, and we are going to move past this one in about 3 minutes because I don't care that much. But
I haven't, but the ones that I use most of the time now are Ultrazones, the Pro 750, I think it is.
is that the
I have the
like
same
the like
set.
super like is that the ones that's basically like gun
FP22,
muffs?
man.
Gun muffs with 7506s in them? No,
No,
something
these
different.
I don't have mine right here near me, but yeah, I use the same ones, and I use them because they're a little bright, and I tend to EQ things a little bright. If I do just like throw it on and grab it and do something, I want to make sure I don't stack something too bright, and it tends to keep me from doing that.
I like them if I'm doing a corporate, like a couple months ago, doing a corporate in an actual cathedral, and I was mixing from obviously behind a column. So I've got the headphones on basically so I can listen to that lectern to exactly hear what's going on with it.
Admit, yeah, because you're not hearing anything remotely
No.
close to like, yeah. You might as well be in a different room.
And in that they are a little on the high end, but they're much more accurate than the what else do I have in my kit? The Shure 840s or whatever I got given a long time ago. And the nice thing with the Shures is they get very, very loud, but they're not very accurate.
And they also have current limiting in them, so it's really tough to blow them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I was not aware that any of these had like, I guess it's just like a resistor network or something in there, Pete, that like just keeps you from killing them. Is that how that works?
PTZ, I think they call them.
Yeah.
They heat warm up, and as they get hotter, they have a higher resistance. They used to use light bulbs inside of speakers for this.
I do remember that. I remember that was
amps
like
are
a big.
Communities.
That was a big thing with community speakers. Baiju, you're like, I know that you're like, why? What did I stumble into? We're talking about headphones. Why do I care?
I would say I'm a bit of a philistine about headphones, that as long as I can hear what's there. So that normally, most of the time, I'm just paying attention to whether I'm getting audio, it's not distorted. And a lot of times I want to listen to the worst headphones I can get, so I can get an experience what the user at the other end on a crappy phone is listening to.
Valid point.
Totally valid. Yeah, absolutely, totally valid.
And back to your point, Brian, like it's the devil you know. I mean, back when I was doing festivals on the East Coast in New England, I had 7506s, and after like the second festival of the season, you kind of get into the groove of knowing how those translate to the PA that you tuned. And I mean, I would get into the pocket where I could dial in a band on pre-fade, unmute, and be 90% there for every act. And that's in the end, at the end of the day, with PA systems and headphones, that's really the goal, I think, is the comfortability.
Yeah, the last serious mixing that I did was at a folk festival here. And I ended up mixing on my, at the time they were Sensophonics, but I ended up mixing on my in-ears all day. And one of the reasons is because the applause in the tent was very loud. And also the background yakking, which got worse year over year, was so loud. And the shifts were 12 hours. And so it was the only way that I could actually keep mixing and protect my hearing at the same time. And I had one of those little EV line arrays, and the first couple of acts, it was in out. And I was like, yep, it's dialed, it's fine. And I just
close enough.
Left them in for the rest of the day. A couple of other points quickly. Back in the old days when 600 ohms was a thing, you could actually use like a pair of the 600 ohm Bayer headsets with an XLR on them and just actually listen to outputs of snakes and stuff like that.
Right.
Right.
You see this thing, guys?
What is that? It's a
a
little
Shure.
blurry.
It's really old.
That's
really,
the
really
Shure
old. Getting the right direction.
FP12, FP21,
Can
22.
I get it on the
12.
camera here? I got a
So
terrible
it's like a
stereo and one was
precursor to the Q box kind of thing.
FP22. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
very,
that's
very
exactly.
old. But
Yeah,
you can plug a
yeah.
microphone into it,
Yeah.
and it goes super loud. You can plug your board into it, all sorts of things. So it's
That's the original Q box.
way before Q box. But I can
Yeah,
plug my
that
600s
was-
into this thing without any problems.
That was basically what that was the genesis of the Q box, because I remember the stupid FP22 in 1991
Yeah.
was like $457, and it was like it was just too painful. I'm like, this is a headphone amp.
It unfortunately runs on a 9-volt, and I would love to. One day I'm going to actually figure out how to convert it to a lithium-ion rechargeable or something like that, because 9 volts are a pain in the butt.
Yeah, and they only last like 2 hours in that thing too.
Which would be super clever. All right, I feel pretty good about the fact that we actually talked about something that I didn't do a poll on, so that's super awesome.
And we did it within 15 minutes.
And we did it within 15 minutes. We're like, okay, do I want this? I at least get to decide which poll we do. Let's do this other one. So here's our options. Second topic, sample rate, Yamaha or literally any other console, please. Waves or I don't like waves. That's basically, do I like external plug-in devices or do I not like external plug-in devices? And this is my personal pet peeve, which is on-off versus mute on channels, whether it's lights for mute or it lights for on-off. I freaking drives me bananas. But
remember the PM5D? So hilarious.
I do, yes.
VDA had a cut button. That's what it was called.
It did, yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes cut looked like out, like on the Midases, the word cut and the word out. It was really hard to tell whether it was one or the other because maybe a little bit of the silk screen had come off or something like that. And it was also when they were toggle switches on the Pro 3, Pro 4 Midases, it was very difficult to tell whether it was when this thing was pointing toward the legend or away from the legend, whether it was actually engaged. So there's a history of confusing graphics there.
And of course, polarity versus phase. That's always another one that they love to put on boards.
Yeah, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this like on-off versus mute as an option in a future poll, but like change it to wildly confusing labeling, and why haven't we fixed that? Because
or just for or against.
Yeah, well, and I want to say that
everything is made from non-English speaking countries.
Exactly.
And the ones that are made from English speaking countries are backwards.
Yeah.
Wrong side of the road.
Remember the Gambles?
Oh,
They're
well,
still
and
around.
that's almost the topic that y'all picked. So I almost want to just go down this road of like stupid
What was the topic though?
The topic that won. Oh, I haven't shared the results. I apologize. That's what I needed to do. I didn't push the button. So yeah, apparently we're leaning into console choices, which is, I guess, related to familiarity and buttons and whether mutes are mutes and on-offs are on-offs. So let's just go down that road. And so Yamaha or literally anything else. And I picked it that way because I'm a Yamaha guy. So therefore I'm Yamaha. I'm super good with that. Like that's the answer to the question I'm asking pretty much all the time.
I'm so Yamaha. I tried to get into Allen and Heath D-Live because of the value of it.
Right.
I just keep going back to Yamaha. That's how stupidly Yamaha I am.
Stupidly Yamaha. Well, and Andy on his website, check12.com. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Sure.
Andy, I am going to plug it every single time we say Yamaha and Andy's on the show, but has built some of the most amazing macro generating things that work with Yamaha stuff. So if you want to use a Stream Deck and have one button push do 47 things on your Yamaha console simultaneously, and you don't want to spend 100 years programming it, you need to see his companion module, because he's basically built a macro recorder. So you can basically record macro, move a bunch of stuff to where you want it to be. That's my macro done, which is a kind of functionality that Yamaha consoles do not have by design, because they're trying to keep things relatively simple. But the nice thing about this is it's a separate thing, so it doesn't really affect sort of the simplicity of. But anyway, so love for Yamaha, but somebody's got to chime in with something else, or else this gets super boring.
Yeah, so I'll say, if I'm being paid to do a thing, it's a Yamaha. If I'm doing something just for myself, for fun, singer-songwriter, folk act, something like that, that's just a fidelity fest, have fun, it's a Waves LV1.
Oh, you're that guy.
I am, but I'm not the one that you know.
I would say this about the LV1. I did do quite a bit of testing with it, and I have a touchscreen for it. I enjoy it. I've used it to track some pretty high-end type like experience recordings, like surround sound, kind of immersive, because of the ease of getting those preamps close to sources and then networking them. I was impressed with the way it sounds. But you know, we've all been in those situations where we're riding that fader, like +5, you know, wherever, and like one little hair up and you're in it, and one little hair down, you're not, and you're feathering and doing all that, and you cannot do that on a touchscreen at all.
I cannot. I cannot. I will not. I can't. I'm sorry. I have to have the amount of mixing that I do, where literally my finger is just in front of the fader, and I'm like, I'm doing this. I'm like, I'm rolling in the direction of up. Like I don't even have my finger on the fader. I'm just sort of going.
Yeah, you can't do that on a touch screen.
Like, and there's no, you know, and while I'm looking at the stage, you know, so I am.
You guys haven't done enough shows where there's literally no place to mix.
Well, I mean, this is
literally say, can you just work in this back room here somewhere? Because I really don't want to see.
And international touring, the LV1 is, you know, it's 2 Pelicans.
I need to do a show and tell of my rig at some point and show you guys what I've got, because
I'd love to. I really have never had the pleasure. It sounds. I always wonder though, latency. Is latency an issue or not?
No.
It's the same as everything else.
And mitigation of risk on mine. I have one 4U rack, 4U? Yeah, 4U rack that has my server, 24 by 12 IO. It's got, you know, everything that I need for the system to run, including keeping Waves SoundGrid, their network audio protocol, it all stays inside that rack. It never leaves that rack, because I don't trust a non-redundant audio over IP, you know, function beyond an 8-inch cable. I mean, I don't want to do that. So I do that. My host's in that rack and everything, and then I'm RDP'd into that with a touchscreen that I can walk anywhere. I do have a fader pack that I can drop, but I really don't like the sensitivity, like you said, the levels of detail in the faders over MIDI. It's just MIDI doesn't have the resolution for it. And that's the most frustrating thing that I have about the system. But I mean, it is very, very good preamps and really good quality. And I don't stack a million plugins on anything. My goal is to make it sound like the Midas I used to mix on. I mean, that's it.
Well, and that's, I mean, yeah.
I agree though that the Yamaha is not the most, well, the older Yamahas may not be the greatest sounding products. And I certainly can hear right away when I was using my D-Live, it sounds better. It's a better preamp or better whatever it is. I don't know what it is.
Warmer. It's all so much warmer.
Better. Right. That being
depends. I mean, every console has a different structure and bus structure. I mean, I've heard mixes on Yamahas that are some of the best mixes I've ever heard were on some of the crappier 5D, you know, 30.
Well, and I mean,
you know,
that's kind of my argument has always been, I used to feel really self-conscious that I was like, well, they sound fine to me. Like it works fine for me. When everybody was like, the Yamahas are so thin, or they just sound this, or they sound that, or you can't get this, and it was just sort of like an accepted wisdom. And I almost felt bad, like maybe I'm missing something, but let's face it. It's speakers, what's on the stage, and where you put the little controls in front of you.
Yeah.
That's your
There's
show.
There's a whole other aspect to this too, and this is partly coming from someone, as someone who managed a sound company, as someone who services and has serviced audio consoles, and that sort of thing. And the thing with Yamaha is they are super consistent. They are super reliable. You've worked on one, usually the next generation comes out and you can figure out how to get around it. I mean, certainly back in analog days, if you knew a PM 1000, PM 2000 was the same thing, but more. PM 3000, same thing, but more. Terrible sounding console.
Except
they always boot up. They always work when you fire them up.
PM 4000, same thing.
Yeah.
I saw a 5000 at the AES show once. I kind of walked past it and went, and I've never. I mixed on an LS9 once. I ended up calling it the Game Boy by the end of the night. Haven't worked on a 1D, a 5D, a 7, any of that stuff. So, because I haven't really done that much mixing since the digital thing became a thing. But for reliability, for longevity, you can't beat Yamaha.
Well, I know my good friend Bill was a non-Yamaha analog guy, and now he's got a shop full of Yamahas. So
yeah, and I was going to say, speaking of the transition from analog to digital, I think Yamaha probably did the best job of making that as seamless for people that had to segue from one to the other than any other manufacturer of consoles did. They emulated analog workflow very well. And as everybody else has noted, that interface that they have for the digital console platforms, once you know how to work on a Yamaha console B, you know how to work on Yamaha console A, C, G, or D in the digital, or at least for the most part. You're not going to walk up to the console like you would with a Digico and say, WTF, where do I start?
Right. Where am I now? And then, I have 2 or 3 complaints about the Digico platform. One, the first time I saw it, it crashed. Bill was there at the same time. So that leaves a bad taste in your mouth when they're demoing it for you in the shop and it locks up and they're like, but look, it's still passing audio. It's fine. And you're like, but I have control over nothing. And they're like, oh, that's fine. We can fix that. What do? You reboot the console. What happens when you reboot the console? It mutes everything. Well, that's not useful. Now I know that was a long time ago, and that was a bunch of consoles ago and a bunch of generations ago, and so I give them a little bit of a pass for that. But it's hard to erase that.
Well, the thing about them is that they're computers, and some manufacturers
manufactured while it was booting up. Yeah, and here's the other thing that Brian didn't mention that happened is the excuse was, well, you were working on the screen too fast. Right. That's why it locked.
Right. You must
do things too fast. I was like, sorry, that's the way live audio is. You have to move quickly.
You must only mix slowly on our consoles, or otherwise they'll lock up. Not what you want to hear.
Yeah, but it's the right tool for the job. I mean, arguably there's more market share of those consoles for touring bands than any other console, because they're way more flexible than a profile, and that's what we're comparing to, because the SD series came out while profiles had the market share, and engineers and artist management can get the band sound they want with studio plugins. I mean, that's really what it is. But from I would say this, mixing on kind of the same PA, similar mics, different bands, different consoles, they all sound drastically different. I mean, I spent a few years doing a stage at South by Southwest with a PA, and I picked a profile because, of the market share, and
Right. Everybody's gonna have a freaking thumb drive. Everyone's gonna have
which we did not allow because of the band. These are unsigned bands. We did not allow.
Oh, gotcha.
Drives. Yeah, but so I spent a week on that. Sent in different configuration, but same PA manufacturer and model. Then after that I went directly into another gig where I was using a Studer Vista corporate thing with a band, a real band, right. And like my drum mics were all your standard like Beta 9152, whatever 604 toms, and I gotta say, when I sound checked that band, that was the next time I heard music through a console, through a PA system from doing the festival like the week prior. And the amount of work that wasn't needed to get the drums to sound right through the Studer versus profile was, I couldn't believe it. And I tuned and designed both systems, so the tuning and all of that was consistent, let's say. That really showed for me I know we're comparing apples and oranges there, but it's basically a studio console versus not a studio console. But
it's not like you couldn't have gotten there with the profile and
correct.
Could not have gotten a very excellent show that everybody went, dude, that show sounded great. Mm-hmm. But when you could literally, like, as close as possible compare apples.
It's the feeling you have when you spin the knob, right? Like with the kick, with the profile, you're doing the boost, the cut, and the boost on a 91, and a lot of it, and on the Studer, it's like the cut, and that's it,
right?
Kind of thing,
And what too is that you can get there, but you will hack the strip. You can get a great sound, but it's not right out of the box necessarily.
And that was true in PM 2000 days too. I mean, the EQ did something, but you had to use a lot of it to get the result that you wanted.
I was going to say about the reliability of Yamaha. The one thing they did that no one else ever did is they wrote their own operating system for the consoles up until the 5D.
Actually, Soundcraft and Studer wrote their own as well.
Did they? I did not know that. I thought they used a Linux system.
Maybe it's Linux. Soundcraft VI series uses some sort of proprietary. It's like it's not Windows. Let's say.
Okay.
Some sort of proprietary something.
And the Soundcraft was always such a great product, and yet never got any market share. I really think that they blew it on the marketing.
That's one that I saw some hardcore analog guys move to digital with the VI because.
Oh, when I used it, I thought it was fantastic.
The way the strips were organized.
Nobody has one.
Super analog.
Yeah, my problem with Soundcraft is that I've only had like 2 or 3 like mid-show crashing failures of consoles, and every single time the console said Soundcraft on the meter bridge. Ooh. And that scars you.
Well, now, an S series or a VI,
it was a long time ago. I readily admit that it is at this point totally not a fair bias. But I still can't.
They had these really terrible consoles back when they were making
bad power and things bad like power that. Supplies and but yeah, no, I did I've done, I don't know, half a dozen shows on VI desks, and they're fine. They were fine. Like they worked. But there's I've done thousands of shows on Yamaha consoles and never had a console failure. I mean, the worst I ever had was in an analog, maybe one channel strip that had like a bad fader or something, but like never even had a power supply failure. Never. Out of thousands of shows, I've done probably 100 shows on non-Yamaha consoles, and I've had crashes like
that. It's funny, isn't it? Like I know people that are staunch Digico guys, and they always have problems with Avid consoles, and then I know guys that are staunch Avid guys, and they always have problems on Digico consoles. It's really it's workflow, really, I think.
Yeah.
And then it's you're projecting an outcome. Like I hate this console, so you're gonna make it break, right?
Well, yeah. I think that there's a whole other area here that we could maybe be another topic for another day, and that is fault tolerance of the general public and the industry. It used to be when a console failed, that was a big deal. And
You
I've
never
seen
used it again.
well, not just that, but maybe the sound company got fired and that kind of thing. And I've seen some failures on some major shows. And my theory is that everybody has had their phone freeze up. Everybody is rebooting their router at home. Everybody has, a blue screen on a laptop from time to time. And the fact is that the general public has gotten so used to that kind of failure that when you say, oh yeah, the console failed because the hard drive was full or a connector wasn't seated properly or something, they go, oh, okay, sure. Yeah. That's happened to me.
I will totally buy that. I think that there's, especially in ironically, the concert business. I did I do almost no music, but I got called to do a festival out in California, and the consoles were all S6Ls. Well, it's a bunch of, we had 8 consoles or something. It was stupid, but so there was some VIs there and a bunch of S6Ls there, but it was a profile show because all the band guys had show files for profiles, so they were like, and they were all excited, this is the new desk or whatever. And like a good solid hour and a half after doors and maybe 20 minutes before, 30 minutes before showtime, somebody loaded their show file, pulled the thumb drive too quickly or whatever, and the freaking front of house console locked up. And I'm like freaking out because we're almost in show, like the console locked up and all that, because I'm not really a profile guy. And like all the other, like all the band guys, the people that we were working for, they were all like, just reboot it. No big deal.
This is what's so cool about the Allen and Heath, though, is that the console can be disconnected from the head, and I think it's brilliant. I think I wish other companies would do that, where all the brains are, separate from the.
There are some other consoles that way. The Studer, the VI6, the S6L actually is that way.
Oh, is it? Okay.
All the audio is in the DSP, and the Surface runs on a separate computer. The PM10 is that way. All the audio.
Well, and the SXL, it's like it's down to like component level. Things are running different. You can have like a fader bank quit on you, and
you can reset it.
And everything else is still working because it's its own subroutine computer that's accessing the.
So on the big boy broadcast consoles, namely CalRec, every single, like you'll get like a module that's say 4 channels worth of encoders and displays and stuff. Every single one of those has its own CPU.
Right.
They're all hot swappable. And so it's so distributed that there is kind of no central area that can really fail.
And that was
notorious for breaking down, though. CalRec in general, people would carry.
I don't think so. I mean, I service.
Oh, I'm sorry, not CalRec.
You're getting confused with CADAC.
CADAC, yes. Everybody carries.
That's a very different thing.
Yes.
Sorry.
Kind of like the crest.
Still English, but yeah.
Yeah, the CADACs are like, there's a reason why they were theater consoles, because you put it in one place, and once you got it working, you did not ever like breathe. Don't lean on it. Don't
clean it.
Don't breathe on it. Don't touch it. And make sure you have a lot of spare. Thing is, they were freaking brilliant, like fantastic desks, but yeah, you don't want to move it because then bad things are going to happen.
The pinnacle of analog consoles, like the CalRec or CADAC, like the Paragon. I guess like the big Gamble's Crest and all that stuff. The trouble with all of them is that they were too big and too complicated, and they all had problems moving, and they had problems having big enough power supplies
because they were hand built. I mean, like that
make them run reliable. But like I did some servicing on Paragons, and the edge connectors were press fit, which is great for something that's not going to move around and that's not going to be subjected to a bunch of different atmospheres, pollution-wise and stuff like that. But when you start moving it around, like the the springiness of the press fit contacts just kind of gives up after a while. And then
every time I would swing by Bill's shop back in the bad old days, one of his XL consoles had modules out of it, and he was cleaning ribbon connectors and something and whatever. I actually I don't even understand for sure, and Andy probably knows better than I do. I don't really delve below the hood much, but like I don't even understand how the big giant Yamaha consoles didn't fail constantly, because there was so many tiny discrete components, and everything is multi-pin connector together. And I do remember that the PM3000 people learned to not take those out of the console tray, because if you put it on like a road case without the console tray, it would bend.
Torque, yeah.
It would torque because the frame was not strong enough, and then
it was a highly flexible mixer. And not
the H3000 had that problem too.
Yeah.
Right. And that was one of the things that they fixed in the 4000, which then added like 300 pounds. But
that's
it didn't.
Why Midas desks were also heavy, because of what was required to make the chassis rigid enough for touring applications also made it, like a block of concrete essentially.
Hideously. But all the ATI stuff, all the Paragon stuff was basically, handmade by elves. And so it was never going to be, still my favorite console to this day is a Paragon 2, but
in the analog days, I grew up with Soundcraft. I don't know if that was popular in the US, but in Canada, everybody had a Soundcraft. So you had a 200, or you had a 200B, or you had a 400 or 800. If you're really rich, you'd have an 8000 or something like that. But they were notorious for intermittent connections. So I would constantly pull these things apart, resolder connectors, redo things, and they kept bringing out new products and still had these same intermittent problems. I never understood why they wouldn't fix the problem, because it was quite fixable if they just did a little bit differently, but they would bring out product after product after product that would have problems, and the power supplies as well always needed resoldering. Everything would unsolder itself. And it was like, Soundcraft, what are you guys doing? Don't you understand that these things are breaking on a constant basis?
Well, and that's where your preconceived biases come in, because the show that I was just talking about, the festival that had some VI desks on it, they were brand new out of the box. Literally took them out of the cardboard and plopped them down, and none of them worked out of the box. And we ended up, thankfully, one of the guys that was sub-renting something was a local California guy who, like, his shop was nothing but Soundcraft stuff. And we were just like, dude, please make this stuff work. And it was pull this card, push that card, tweak this thing, and all I could think of was a 200B or whatever. Like it was just like, it sounded fantastic once it was all put together and worked. Like it was, and I like the workflow, and I love the little VistaSonic or whatever they call the little knobs on the screen.
They have a disconnect between the people using it and the people designing it. Sometimes they're great engineers working these things out and go, this is a fantastic design, but they don't ever talk to people who actually use them on a day-to-day basis.
Well, there's electronic design and there's physical design too. Right. And the circuitry can be brilliant, but if the cables aren't routed properly, or the audio busing is routed too close to the mute solo busing or something, and then you get little clock noise things and all that stuff. And one of the things, to bring it back to the Yamaha thing, since that was kind of the original topic, is from having serviced them, probably less than practically any other console, because they don't need it that much. But the service manuals start with, okay, to do this task, you need to take out these screws, and it should take this long, and then take this part off.
Like a car repair manual.
Absolutely.
Step
yeah,
but
it's a step by step. And then when you get inside, there's things like when, you can lift up the whole front of it, and then there's a little prop bar, like a car.
Yes. All the old Yamahas had a little arm that would hold the top.
Because their manufacturing was so consistent, though. Yeah. I mean, other manufacturers, the manufacturing's so inconsistent. I mean, I had one, it's a model that's been out for 8 years. This desk is new, 3 years old, and the faders were doing a jittery thing, and the manufacturer's like, oh yeah, on that particular run of that particular thing, there's an extra diode in there that allows for some like ghost voltage to a thing. So you have to cut all the diodes out. This is like, you know, a $200,000 console. Like
it seems to almost get worse the higher dollar console you get.
Yeah.
And I think some of that's just because
it's like a Ferrari, you know, like a Ferrari.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. I did a go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I just was going to bring it back to Dog and Pony Show a few years ago, where when we had 2 or 3 large console manufacturers have brand new consoles. Connect the dots for those that know. One manufacturer, I said, all of the preamps updated. Are they better preamps than the old desk? Well, no, not really, but they run at 96K. Okay. And then the other manufacturer, are the preamps updated? Yep, all brand new preamp design, blah, 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 signature, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to name the name because I don't want to call anything out. And you listen to the one, and I'm like, all right, give me a 58. And you listen to a 58 through a PA, even if it's speakers on sticks, and you know right away, like what that preamp sounds like.
Right.
And go to the other desk, do the same thing, same PA, talk on it. It's like, okay, sounds a little bit like these preamps need some help. And they're like, well, that's what plugins are for. So the question, you know, when you have a race car, you know, do you put crappy tires on the race car and then adjust for them with better suspension? Or do you put the best tires you can and then use the suspension to enhance the handling? Like for me, I want them to spend as much money as they can on the preamp design and get it to sound the best, because you know, it's back to that profile and Studer story I told. You know, that was just mainly because of the quality of the preamps in the Studer are just that good, you know, and
I've had similar experiences. Yeah.
I was just going to say that we talked about this the other day, was preamps are so easy to build now. There's so many easy ways to make great preamps. Are they just by nature designing them to sound different? And the question came up with the Behringer versus Midas. Is it really a different preamp, or are they just tuned to one to sound slightly different than the other? So is there any excuse for there being bad preamps in this day and age?
It could be components. That just coincidentally, I was just actually fooling around with a preamp design on my bench yesterday. But component quality can have a huge impact on what something sounds
like.
Like
it could be the same design, but if the components are
if they're using cheaper capacitors, capacitors in particular, but if they're just using cheaper parts in the down market product, then
but aren't they at this point like it's certainly the cheaper mic pre's, isn't that just basically an IC chip that you're buying from China probably? That's you're slapping, and like it's all in there. Like it's
it could all, there are like mic preamps on a chip, but they still need external components like DC blocking capacitors and you know, real XLRs as opposed to shitty XLRs, and you know, things resistors, how the power supply scheme is in the console is important. Power supply is hugely important to how things actually sound. And when you go from the difference between a desk that uses like plus and minus 15 volt power supplies, like say a Mackie SR32 or whatever they were called, to a console that uses plus and minus 18 volt power supplies, as you will hear that in things like kick drums, in things like snare drums, like things with transients and that sort of thing. So there's lots of things that go on.
I do think though that like once you get to the, and we're about to veer down preamp, so I'm probably going to like cut us off, because then we'll be here for another 3 hours.
Yeah, and that wasn't the intent. The intent was more
and I totally get it. And for what it's worth, so I'm gonna make my little like point, because I think this has just been interesting to me to see this specifically with Yamaha, and I didn't put this topic up specifically to say this, but I think it's interesting. The latest Yamaha consoles, I feel like Yamaha's goal with mic pre's from like day one has always been to make them as linear as they possibly can up until the point where it just falls apart and clips, which I think is a lot of the reason why people didn't like them that much, because they liked that when I start pushing into it, it kind of goes back to that headphone conversation. Like, oh man, when I push my amp a little bit, it starts to sweeten, it starts to sound better. When I push my preamp a little bit, it starts to sound better, it starts to sound sweeter, different, whatever. It sounds different. And I think Yamaha has always been like, no, we want it to sound exactly. We're trying to make it be exactly the same. And at the highest, component level, that's, they were using the best stuff that they could. And the latest Rivage series, they finally, I think it was one of those things where I could almost hear the Yamaha engineers just kind of going, fine, we'll build preamps that distort if that's what you really want. When we'll just make them distort in a way that you like, and we'll call it silk, and we'll call it whatever whatever the other thing is. And the interesting thing is, it's
They're
working.
not building them that way. They're making them emulate that.
Exactly.
But the actual structure of the hardware of those preamps are top notch, and
absolutely,
don't have any distortion in them.
Right.
But even the old ones did. The old Rios did as well.
But they're
preamps.
it's interesting that they're building in a form of distortion, whatever you want to call it, that is pleasant, that people like. And I have had, over the last 6 months, I've worked maybe 4 or 5 shows where I was working with folks that are more in the touring concert world. I don't do a lot of stuff in that anymore, but I just happen to be around the people at the right time or whatever. And I had several people just in passing conversations who were like, oh yeah, the best sounding console in the concert world now is a PM10. And these were all Digico people,
people that can pick anything they want are now
right. Well,
Yamaha,
and people who are diehard Digico people.
I know people who own Digicos that are now PM10 users.
Right. Yeah. And so it's just been really interesting. It's like the engineers finally, they just said, you know what, we're just going to build in an emulation that gives you what it is that you want. And sure enough, so, I mean, I guess that kind of goes to, and I will close this up at this point, that goes to that whole thing of, I think a lot of the reason why folks didn't necessarily love Yamahas in the past was because they were so linear, and now they've kind of conceded, and at least at the highest end are like, all right, we're going to make it a little bit less linear in a way that we think you'll like even better. And maybe that's what we as humans just prefer. So any last final thoughts from anybody?
Why we listen to records.
Close it up really nicely.
I think we nailed it.
Yeah.
Nailed it. Okay,
Group of audio guys that agreed on something.
Well, see, this has been the funny thing about this show is that we start off with I really like this, I really like, and kind of when you get to the end of it, you kind of go, well, but I get it. Like in certain cases, no, oh yeah, no, and you end up kind of all agreeing when you sort of unpack it all, which is kind of the point of the show. It's like, I find that very interesting that when you unpack it, you kind of realize, oh yeah, no, it really does come down to.
And we got 2 topics done today.
Which is amazing. So I'm going to take us off YouTube people. Goodbye. Thank you so much for being here.